Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming out today. So you all know the theme, TEDxLondon Pride and Refugee Week. I'm really excited that the organisers have so brilliantly decided to bring these two cultural events together so we can talk about something really, really crucial for our communities. As Mariam just mentioned, I'm Reeta Loi. I'm an artist and I'm founder and CEO of Gaysians, which some of you may have heard of. And it's my great pleasure to be here with two absolute experts in this topic. I've been learning loads already. And I'd like you to welcome Moud Goba, who is National Manager of Micro Rainbow and Chair of Trustees for UK Black Pride. And also Nancy Kelley, who is CEO of Stonewall. Give us a round of applause. So the question we're asking is, how do we support LGBTQ plus refugees at Pride and beyond? Now, I wanted to start with a little bit of scene setting so that we're all really clear on the language that we're using and just so everybody has a bit of a background, which has been helpful for me because I've had to learn a lot on research while I've been doing this. So let me share what we found with you. So just some background. So after World Wars I and II, the international community created a host of laws in order to protect our human rights, and in particular for those who were most affected by the conflicts. And examples of those are the Geneva Conventions, the Declaration of Human Rights, and the Refugee Convention. Feel free to jump in if I get any of this wrong.
We're not marking you, don't worry.
The Refugee Convention was a response to the millions of people forcibly displaced during and after World Wars I and II. The Refugee Convention aims to protect refugees and is the key legal document that defines what a refugee is and what their rights are. Countries that have signed the convention are obliged to protect refugees in their country and treat them according to internationally recognised laws. The UK has signed this convention. Being a refugee is not illegal, and being an asylum seeker is not illegal. We all have the right to seek asylum, and seeking asylum is a legal process. Even if a claim for asylum is rejected, it also doesn't mean a person has done anything illegal. If a claim for asylum is accepted, that's when a person gains refugee status. Refugees can work in the UK and people seeking asylum cannot. Are we clear? Okay, great, good. Now, in terms of LGBT rights and some stats and figures around where we are, the Human Dignity Trust shares that 67 countries still criminalise same-sex relationships and LGBTQ plus people. 11 countries can and do impose the death penalty for same-sex intimacy, specifically. LGBTQ plus people are multidimensional, like all of us, so they may or may not be seeking asylums for reasons to do with their gender and sexuality as well. And finally, I'm just going to add a little bit of context here about numbers of asylum seekers and refugees, because we know that we're dealing with a lot of misinformation with regards to that in the media. According to the UNHCR, in November 22, only half a percent of the UK's population are regarded as refugees or asylum seekers. Obviously, a much smaller percentage of that are from the LGBTQ plus community. Are we clear? Yes. Now, I know that Moud has some specific numbers on her particular work and numbers around actual people that are LGBTQ plus refugees and asylum seekers. But I think first we just want to come over to you both. I wanted to ask about your specific experiences in the work that you do with regards to LGBTQ plus refugees and asylum seekers. Can you tell us a bit about your experiences and work? If we can start with you, Nancy.
Thanks for that. I love the way that you were looking sideways to check if you'd got anything wrong, and we were go, say more facts, it's going great. So hi everyone, my name is Nancy, my pronouns are she, her. Stonewall kind of works on LGBTQ plus refugees issues here in the UK and also internationally. Here in the UK, the work that we do is focused mainly on lobbying and campaigning for, I would say, I want to be able to say better protection of LGBTQ plus refugees' rights. But actually, the truth is, what we spend our time lobbying for is to try and prevent further degradation in LGBTQ plus people's human rights in terms of refugee status. So just to kind of make that come alive for people, the Nationality and Borders Bill kind of rips a hole through the refugee, now the Nationality and Borders Act, rips a hole through the Refugee Convention a mile wide. We are now in a position where there is like no legal route of entry for people to come to the UK to seek refuge, to seek asylum. And it makes things much, much harder for LGBTQ plus refugees in particular, right? So we do a lot of fighting with organisations like Micro Rainbow, Rainbow Railroad, refugee charities, to try and stop our governments continually making things worse for refugees generally and for LGBTQ plus refugees specifically. Outside of the UK, we really do two things. We try and work with the big international institutions. So this is the UN High Commission on Refugees, but it's also big international NGOs. So, you know, Save the Children and Oxfam and the International Rescue Committee, to get them to take seriously the needs of LGBTQ plus people within refugee flows. They're not terribly good at it generally, I think it would be fair to say. And we also have a programme of work specifically supporting LGBTQ plus Afghan people to safely prepare for making a claim to refugee status and to resettle. So we've been able to resettle, in fact, people you'll hear about more here in the UK, and we're currently working to also resettle LGBTQ plus Afghans in another EU country.
Thank you. And Moud, what about you?
So at Micro Rainbow, we work on the ground with LGBTQI refugees once they arrive. When people arrive, then there are additional challenges because, of course, they arrive and they are received by the Home Office, they claim asylum, and they're put into Home Office provided accommodation if they're eligible for it. Not everyone is eligible for it. And in this space, they share with other refugees a house, a room. And the challenge is, if you're coming from a country where you're criminalized, perhaps others have come as refugees because of war, and you have come because of war, and of course your sexual gender identity. And if in the same space, we find that a lot of the people we work with are abused, they experience extreme homophobia, transphobia. There have been abuses where people are beaten up, people experience sexual harassment, sexual abuse, emotional, and blackmail, you know, we tell people who are back home. So in our work, we try and provide safe accommodation. When we started Micro Rainbow, the work was very much integration and social inclusion. But while we were doing this work, we realized that a lot of the people we work with were homeless. They would abandon their Home Office accommodation than face abuse and perhaps come towards London or Manchester, cities where they felt a bit more safer. But because we're not allowed to work, as you said earlier, they experience challenges and they would get into exploitative situations for a roof over their head, including domestic servitude or going home with people after clubs. So we really wanted to tackle this homelessness, and we started our project for safe housing. We started this in 2017, and so far we have 20 houses providing 30,000 bed nights. We still can't meet capacity, of course, but that's the main part of our work, which is providing safe housing. We also do social inclusion work because the people are isolated. Refugees only getting £40 a week. And that is for your health care. If you're a woman, that's for your menstrual products, that's for your food, that's for your transport. So for you to now socialize, it's almost impossible. So we have different activities to really curb that isolation and all other challenges people have. They don't have the traditional safety nets people have. I remember when I came to the UK as a refugee from Zimbabwe, I really relied on the Zimbabwean community. There's a lot of technical support from core nationals or from other refugees, but this support is often withdrawn when people find out your sexuality. So you end up alone and isolated. So we do work on that, and integration, which is where we've worked with Stonewall to help LGBT Afghans to integrate, and other people who become or who are granted refugee status. We do quite a lot. But the three main work is safe housing, integration, and social inclusion. Perhaps I can share more as we go along.
Thank you, Moud. It's really incredible work, as you're hearing, and I think it's sort of quite clear that it's amazing that you're supporting each other as well as organisations, even that, and you're working kind of like in different parts of this, but you're fighting the battle together, which I think is something really amazing about the queer community in general. Next, Nancy, I wanted to talk to you a bit more about the legal process itself. Can you talk us through sort of what actually happens in terms of the legal process for refugees and asylum seekers who are LGBTQ+?
So I'll say a couple of things about the process as a whole. Moud, you can tell me if I get anything wrong. And then I'll say a couple of things about specifically why this is so problematic for LGBTQ+ refugees. So I think maybe a starting point is that, and this is true all over the world, the Refugee Convention wasn't developed with us in mind, right? It was developed, the kind of mental model for the framers of the Refugee Convention was that you had essentially like a political activist who was at risk during a period of conflict. And one of the problems that causes is like the legal models, including our legal models that flow from that convention, that flow from that history, have like a model in mind of what a real refugee looks like or what a well-founded refugee claim looks like. And it fits really badly with LGBTQ+ refugees whose identity forms part of their claim. It might only be part of their claim, but whose identity forms part of their claim. And so already at that entry point, LGBTQ+ refugees struggle much more within a system that is dreadful for everybody. They struggle much more to have their claims seen as credible, to have their claims kind of supported, to find kind of good quality legal advice. Everything is harder for an LGBTQ+ refugee, basically, in a system that I cannot emphasize enough how broken our overall refugee system here is in the UK. Some of the ways in which that's recently got a lot worse. So I talked a bit about the Nationality and Borders Act. It made it worse for LGBTQ+ refugees in a couple of key ways. It introduced harsher penalties and a different kind of track for what are called late claims. So the idea is you're supposed to kind of make your claim as soon as reasonably possible. And in the new system, you get a more conditional form of leave to remain if you make a late claim. Well, nobody walks across the border and says, I'm a lesbian. If you come from a place where saying you're a lesbian gets you beaten or killed or raped, nobody walks. I mean, I get scared walking through Heathrow and I have a UK passport, right? Nobody walks across the border and says, I'm a lesbian, I'm a trans person, I'm a bi man. Nobody is going to say that. So anything that penalises late claims has a disastrous effect on our community specifically. The other thing that recently got a lot worse through that act was the burden of proof was altered. So kind of was the burden of proof shifted higher, the kind of mountain you have to climb shifted higher. And I guess I would just invite you to imagine how easy it would be for any of you to prove you were a trans person, a lesbian, a bi person, a pan person, if you came from a country where being those things gets you killed or gets you beaten or gets you, thrown out of your community. It's incredibly difficult to kind of evidence things to those standards. And then the last thing I'll say, and then I promise I'll shut up, is the asylum system overall is really colonialist and xenophobic and racist. So this should be seen as a starting point, but that again affects our community in particular ways. So quite often LGBTQ+ refugees from outside of the UK are judged by a standard of what kind of a normal, quote unquote, normal gay person looks like. And so if you're not using the language that would be recognised here, if you're not talking about going to clubs, if you're not doing all these things that are completely ludicrous in the context you just came from, you are seen as less credible, and that affects the likelihood of your claim being seen as being accepted. So those are just some examples of the way in which kind of the system from the start to the finish disadvantages our community specifically.
Thanks, Nancy. Moud, feel free to answer the same question, but I wanted to ask you a bit more about the burden of proof and your experience with that. You don't have to talk about your very personal experience, which I know you have shared with me before, but you know, anything that you want to share about that, just so people understand a little bit more about what that's like.
I think practically the burden of proof is very, very high. If you imagine that you're living in a country where you're hiding your sexuality, and sometimes you have to go into this forced heterosexuality. For women, that means you might have children. And even if you have a person, you have a lover, it means that you're hiding. You don't keep pictures, you don't keep texts, you don't keep letters, you don't keep no evidence. And even if you had that kind of evidence, people flee when something happens often. And when you flee, what do you take? What evidence do you take? You don't have evidence. You won't have a tenancy agreement with your lover's name, even if you lived together. But not everyone will have a lover because they're afraid of being outed, or they're afraid of, you know, exploring their sexuality. So when you have to prove who you are, where do you start? For me, it wasn't so hard to get evidence, but it was still hard. I had already started activism. I was already involved with Black Lesbian UK and UK Black Pride. When I arrived in the UK, I was very excited. I was a young person, and you know, I quickly looked for Pride, Soho, Candy Bar. So I had lots of pictures. I had lots of pictures, yeah. You know, I was at Pride, I was everywhere. But still, it was really difficult when I went to the Home Office, and, you know, the Home Office officer asked me, so you are a lesbian and you have a child. Okay. So from that moment when I went to the screening unit, it was a sobering moment. You know, when I got there, I was so excited. I had a story to tell. You know, I had a case to put to the Home Office. But as soon as the questions started, I realized that, okay, this is going to be difficult. It was a very humbling experience. That meant that, you know, I had to kind of humble myself and contact some exes that I didn't want to contact to say, hey, do you have any pictures? And being an asylum seeker is really, at that time, because of the language, I was ashamed of having to seek safety. So that meant I hadn't told colleagues, I hadn't told friends, I hadn't told relatives, but then I had to approach some colleagues and say, this is the situation I'm in, I need a letter of support. But if you imagine that even if you have all this evidence, it can be refused as self-serving. It can be said, you know, that's just your friend, you know, it's not your lover, it's your friend who's trying to help you. You really have to be a credible witness to your own story, to your own life. So this is the challenge that the people we work with have, that you have to be credible. Sometimes people have language barriers. That means, you know, they might not know, oh, the LGBTQI, you don't have English, or even if you have, some of the words are words that I learned when I came to the UK. Perhaps now it's easier because of social media, but before certainly was difficult, and things like that can get you a refusal. You know, or if you said you went to Soho and you describe your experience, and if it's not believed, or if your coming out experience is not the same as the Western, it can be a challenge. If you don't have a lawyer who is experienced in dealing with LGBTQI cases, that can be also difficult to go through the process on your own. I think you've already covered quite a lot on the system, but one of the things that people don't realize is how long it can be. You don't have time. It's an indefinite process. From the day you claim asylum, you are waiting. You wait for your interview, and when you have your interview, you wait for a decision. If that decision is refused, then you wait for a court date, and then you wait for the judge to give you a decision. It can be such a long process for people. My process took 3 years. it's quick. Sometimes it's fast, but often it's very long. I remember one of the first people to move into micro rainbow housing was in October 2017 when we opened, and he was just granted refugee status in December 2022. So that's 5 years, and 5 years of a young person who arrived when he was 18, 19, and he's been waiting. He's an ambitious young person, and he wanted to go to college, he wanted to go to university. He had everything that he wanted to do, but he could not do, he could not work. So this is another space where people fall into this space of, losing your self-esteem, your confidence. You're constantly waiting without any hope, and living in poverty, as well as all other challenges that we have.
Thank you, Moud. I think we're starting to get an idea of the sorts of challenges that people are facing, and it's people that are leaving their families and their homes and their cultures and their language and their customs and coming to a place where there are so many barriers, and those barriers are getting worse, right? What can we do? What can we do? Give us some tips for everybody in the room. What action can we take? Because I think this is an audience that likes to get involved and support and take action. So how do you think people can take something home with them that they can put into action straight away that can help to make people's lives better?
So much. It's great. Now you're feeling sad. It's great. You can help fix it. So there are all kinds of campaigns that you can support. So campaigns that are against increasing restrictions in our asylum laws here in the UK. So you can follow organisations like Rainbow Migration, but you can also follow and support Refugee Action, Refugee Council's campaigns, because anything that makes it better for refugees is going to make it better for LGBTQ+ refugees too. And so it's everything from like emailing MPs to showing up to demonstrations. Everybody can get involved in that. You can also support like anti-deportation campaigns and get involved at a local level, volunteer with your local community. There will be both refugee organisations, refugee groups, and depending on where you live, there will be LGBT refugee groups that you can support. You should give money if you can. That, obviously you should feel free to donate to Stonewall, but what you should also do, and probably more do, is donate to organisations like Micro Rainbow, African Rainbow Family, that work directly with these communities. And like big shout out, both of those organisations, so Micro Rainbow and African Rainbow Family. It's great that I'm telling people to give you money, right? My director of fundraising would literally be slapping me right now. Obviously, you can also give us money, but they have these amazing, you don't have to have a ton. They set up these amazing Amazon wish lists. So when there's a new house that's opened, and it's kind of really beautiful. You can I think I've bought someone a duvet and things like that. You can go on and you can just add something. So there's just so much that you can do locally with your time and your support and your voice. And if you have ever any spare money, your money. So all of those things, all of the things.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always want to tell people is to always educate yourself, be in the know of who in our communities, left behind, who is the marginalized within our already marginalized community. Knowledge always helps, and challenging ignorance wherever we come across it. In terms of what we can do practically, one of the other things that I haven't mentioned we do at Micro Rainbow is we've been working with people coming from Ukraine, LGBTQIA people, connecting them with hosts in the UK. We've supported, I think, over 100 people to come through. So you can contact us and connect with organizations such as Refugees at Home if you have a spare room, and if you want to be a host to support someone coming from Ukraine or someone who's already here and needs temporary accommodation while we find a more permanent solution for housing for them. Nancy mentioned our Amazon wish list. We do, every time we open a house, we have a long wish list. People send us everything: pillows, duvets, a toaster, even spoons, anything you can. And a large part of our work, we rely on volunteers. People volunteer to support us. We have social inclusion activities. We have different workshops, mental well-being workshops such as yoga. We have a 5-year dance program. Anyone who has skills that they think they can help us with, we always welcome that. We've had someone who used to take people around different museums and introducing them to London and different things so that people are not alone and isolated at home. So we really value time. We have trained people as asylum guides, people who are trained to tell people about the system from the start to the end, because not everyone will get a solicitor as they go through the process. So we do train volunteers to help to inform people about what the process is about, of course within the boundaries of what we are allowed to do. So there's a lot. We really appreciate our volunteers. In our integration program and employability work, we work with different corporate partners in terms of support with sort of CV writing workshops, employability support, such as interview training techniques. People haven't been working, or they don't know the UK labour market or they've been working for 5 years. So sometimes it really helps before they get their refugee status to at least start working on their CV, start looking at what they want to do, and that is something that the support we get from volunteers. So don't be shy. You can contact us and tell us what we can discuss, what we can do and how you can support us. So we value time as well as money.
Brilliant. Thank you both. And we're going to wrap up soon, but I wanted to ask, I've got 2 more questions and then we're going to have an audience Q&A. So my next question was, do you have some stories that you can share for us that are sort of, stories of what it could look like, or stories that are hopeful, that show us that, how it can be, essentially? Moud, can we start with you?
Of course. I've got lots of stories. I know it's all kind of doom and gloom, the process, which it is. It's a dehumanizing process, from the start to the end. But there's such beautiful stories of, people who get their refugee status at the end and they live freely and they move on with their lives, me included. So, like I said, we have lots of stories. Some of the people who were living in our house, who first started living in our house, we had an intersex person who had been abused because, they were very feminine, but their documentation said male. So they always ended up in home office male accommodation. And they experienced so much abuse. They moved from London to Liverpool and then back to London and then moved 3 times around London. So the day they came to our house, Safe House, they were one of the first people to move there. It was so beautiful to see them say, oh my God, I can do my makeup, I can, put my dresses out. And they were so happy. That first house was so beautiful. The people who moved in there, I think, are still friends to date. And 2 of them are sharing their house. One of them is actually now a director at Micro Rainbow. They've moved on. They work in a software company, and it's been beautiful to see how, if people are provided safe accommodation and support, how they flourish and how they can have all parts of themselves, or they bring all parts of themselves to the tables. There's so many beautiful stories of people who are able to move on. If I can share another story, someone who came through the Stonewall program, a woman, she was able to get integration support, and through our mentoring program, she used to work in Afghanistan in a bank, and when she came to the UK, she wasn't sure how to start. She attended the employability sessions. We connected her to a mentor at PayPal, and she was able to get a job. The mentor really worked with her in looking for this job. Not only was she able to get a job, she went back to her mentor and said, they offered me this much, and the mentor said, no, go back and ask for more. She actually went back and asked for more and called me and said, yeah, they agreed to the salary they've asked for. And to see her move on and move out of the bridging hotel, and she's living in her own house, her partners rejoined her, she was able to be, to come through as a partner. Stories like that just really do give me hope.
That's beautiful. Thanks, Moud. Thank you. And Nancy.
I get to tell a story as well. So this is kind of a story about trying, and I kind of want to, because I want to encourage everybody to try to do something. I think these these challenges, these people's stories can feel really like overwhelming, and sometimes when you try, good things can happen. And I do want to acknowledge that running an organisation helps me in my trying. So in the lead up to Taliban taking over in Afghanistan, this is a story of how Stonewall, for no apparent reason, is involved in helping people get out of Afghanistan, right? About 2 weeks before Kabul fell, we got some emails through our kind of info@Stonewall account. There were about 4 or 5 different emails, and they were from desperate LGBTQ+ Afghan people that were hiding in Kabul and had realised that there was no chance that Kabul wasn't going to fall. And what they had just done is gone on the internet and searched for LGBTQ+ organisations and found, and just randomly, like message in a bottle, right? And myself and Leanne, who's my director of Global, both have a refugee background. I used to work at Refugee Council years ago. And so we thought, we'll just ring the organisations and find out who's getting people out, right? Who's getting the most vulnerable people out of Afghanistan? And we rang round everyone. They said, nobody's doing it. You know, we don't do that work anymore. We don't work internationally. And so we kind of went, okay, well, we'll try and get people out. And this embarked in this kind of absolutely ludicrous months of like midnight call. At some points I was like in the middle of the night talking to the American military commander running Kabul airport. We were talking to these amazing people hiding on the ground who were telling us, you know, this is what we can see on the ground. It was just absolutely wild, and you know, all unfunded. And me and Leanne and Robbie, my director of communications, spent months and months working with NGOs and trying to get the UK government to say it would take people. And it was maximum chaos. Like I always say, I love a messy queer, but this was like messy queers do humanitarian assistance, right? Like literally at one point I was on holiday in a tent, don't think glamorous, think just outside of London, in a tent, talking in the middle of the night to people to, you know, please can you get people out on this plane kind of thing. It was madness, it was absolute madness. And we were able to get, amazingly, the Home Secretary to agree to a first cohort of people to get humanitarian protection and eventually to get them here and get their families reunited to them. And last week, actually, I was at an event for some of our ambassadors, and one of my colleagues was speaking at that event about our continuing work. So we're currently supporting around 700 people, right, to try and support them to build their claim and get them out eventually with our partners ILGA Asia. And my colleague is one of the people who sent that email, and to me, from Kabul. He was the person that we were saying, can you see, are they still letting people out through at the airport gates? What can you see? And he's here now with his family, and he works as our caseworker, and he threw his arms around me and said, I've just got another 4 people accepted for resettlement in, I can't say the country, but another EU country. And I didn't think it would work. I didn't think we'd be able to get a single person out. Lord knows you had to be so patient with how chaotic and messy the whole thing was. We were like, we can get them here. Can you look after them? We'll try and get them here. But I just hope that is inspiring to all of you to do something. Like, it might not work, but do something, because it also might work, right?
Wow, amazing. Thank you both so much. What incredible, incredible humans, right? Amazing. So inspiring. So one last question from me, which is, what would you like the audience to remember from this conversation? What do you want to leave them with before we go to a Q&A?
So people move, and LGBTQ plus people move, and sometimes we move because we have to. And this is not about like small boats or illegal migration or any of that stuff. This is about our family, our LGBTQ plus family, and they are on the move because they have to move for safety. And so think about it like that. Think about it like that, and let that guide your actions and the things you do or try to do, because every single one of our LGBTQ plus refugee family deserves to have a chance for a safer life.
I think for me is when people arrive, asylum seekers, refugees, we should really think of and be considerate of the language we use. People are not asylum seekers. They're people seeking asylum and people seeking refuge. They're still people, they're still humans. If we see people as humans, then we at least stop othering them, because at the moment there is us, there are other migrants, there are other people who come to work. Then there are those, the asylum seekers. So I think remembering that asylum seekers are humans and we mustn't other people. Let's just remember that they're human beings with ambitions. They're human beings who are just looking to be safe, to be free, and to love. So just see us as humans.
Thank you both so much. That's been really informative, and it's obviously something you're both so passionate about as well, and that really comes across. So thank you for all the work you do. And we're going to move over to the audience now for some questions. We've got a couple of roving mics at the back there. Take this person in the yellow.
Thank you very much. Hi, my name's Jordan Williams. Nice to meet you guys. In all of some of the stories that you told and the work that you guys do, how are you engaging with the arts and artists in the work that you guys do?
So you said, how are we engaging with the arts and artists? I think for Micro Rainbow, it's around social inclusion. So we have, like I said, a 5-year dance program, which is really around mental well-being. Sometimes we have people who volunteer, especially around the arts, who come. We've had a choir, we've done some theater work, like little plays that we make. So I think that's our engagement around the arts, usually around social inclusion and mental well-being.
For us, not so much. I mean, we've had some creative collaborations that have been quite private, because the people we support directly, we work most directly are LGBTQ+ Afghans, and it's just not safe to be public. Like, I can't use not even people's names, you can't have people's stories told because of repercussions for them here or back home. But we've worked with creatives to do kind of storytelling, to build support for the work internationally. And I do think that different forms of creative storytelling from previous work that I've done in this space can be some of the most empathy-building work. And so kind of initiatives like Refugee Week, etc., those sorts of things have been really powerful in kind of building empathy and building support for the refugee community more broadly.
Thank you. Over here in the blue.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tash. Lovely to meet you all. Before I get to my question, I just wanted to say, can I grab you afterwards? Because I work for an ad tech company and we redirect ad spend to charities. So basically, for watching an ad, you're rewarded with a donation to charity. So we've done work with Stonewall in the past as well, so I would love to catch you. But my question, sorry, I just really wanted to make sure you knew that. How do you cope? Because there's a lot of shit times, let's put it bluntly. So how do you cope and how do you balance and look after your mental health?
That's a great question, Tash.
It's a great question. I think I am learning to take time out because the work that we do with is quite emotional. I think I remember when people from Afghanistan arrived, me and Leanne went there, we thought we would spend an hour just meeting and greeting people. We arrived at 9 in the morning. We didn't leave until 10 because the moment we got to the door, it was someone's first time saying I'm gay or just expressing themselves. They had a lot to tell, stories to tell about what happened, asking questions about how they can help people behind it. It's like really heavy emotional work. So I'm really learning to take time out so that I don't experience the burnout. But it's really hard when you're a person with lived experience, because I know what someone is going through. So if someone is messaging me when I'm supposed to take time off, or when I'm on annual leave and they're saying, I'm homeless right now, this has happened to me, I reply, even sometimes out of hours. But I'm really learning to step back a little. It's a difficult question to answer, but because like I said, when you have lived experience, you know what it's like, you know what people are going through, and sometimes it's really difficult to not engage or not support people, but still learning on that.
I just have to say, so when Moud and Leanne were like literally meeting people on the tarmac, they were the only people that went. I didn't want to sort of show up, because obviously that's like, I was going to swear, I probably can't. That would be like rubbish, and about me meeting my needs. But I was absolutely desperate for these people to land on the tarmac. And I got this hilarious call from Leanne when she was with you going, Nancy, I need you to send me another picture. And I was like, what of? And she was like, of you. And I was like, why? And she said, they've been saying like, where is Nancy? Because some people that she'd been talking to a lot, she was like, Nancy is really talking to the Prime Minister's office again today, you know, like for months, right? And she said, the only picture I've got is your WhatsApp picture, and it's you in like a dog walking hoodie. And like, they're literally super unimpressed. So I had to like, scroll through and find a good picture. Sorry, it's a bit of a silly story. So I do kind of broader LGBTQ plus human rights work, and it's a wild old time generally. I, like Moud, would describe it as a work in progress. I think a lot about, two things. One is that, like, human rights work, civil rights work is not about you. Like, it's like there's this huge boulder, and people have nudged it a bit forward before you, and people are nudging it alongside you, and people are going to come along and nudge it along after you. And so, like, not putting so much ego into it that you're like, I have to save everybody, because you won't and you can't. And also that's like a really unbalanced way of thinking about how the world works, I guess. So I find that really helpful. Like, my job is to kind of sort of stay on deck for as long as I can and be part of, alongside so many amazing people, including Moud here, push it a bit further. So I think that really helps me a lot. And the other thing that really helps me a lot is I actually think that this moment in time would be harder for me if I wasn't part of fighting against it. So as hard as it is, I have the privilege of working in a job where I get to try and fight to make things better. And that's actually, in some ways, like, easier than feeling like you have no ability to even try. So, yeah.
We're trying.
Yeah. It's hard, isn't it? I think, we're in Gaysians, I mean, we receive emails from people that we can't always help everybody, and I think it's a bitter pill to swallow, but we are also part of the communities that we're trying to support and serve, so we have to save something for ourselves. You can't pour from an empty cup, etc. So yeah, so read your mind. So, but I think maybe because I'm South Asian, I have a lot of practices that I lean into. So meditation and well-being practices are something that me and my team sort of lean into quite a lot as well. Which we can have a chat about afterwards, probably, right?
I'm very bad at meditating.
Okay, I've got a hack for you, so we'll talk about that later. Someone's got the mic. They're keen. Okay, let's go. Let's have it.
Me.
Hi.
Hello, everybody. My name is Helen. My pronouns are she/her. I'm the project lead from Living Free UK. My question wasn't really a question. I'm here to commend your work, Nancy and Moud. Moud especially has been a community leader for our organization. She's a long-time friend, and she's made really long-term appearances to our causes. And I'm here just to say really spread what I have learned from watching Moud in the background. You don't really have to be an activist. I think I came into the community and the work that I've done was because I was looking for a safe space. I wanted to leave my baby girl life and find a partner, probably move on. But I came here to stay, and sometimes members that are within our community think that in order to get their asylum accepted or exist freely, they have to exercise some sort of activism, while all you have to do really is make sure that you exist. And Moud, like many other community leaders, have taught me that I can be a woman, bisexual, African, Sicilian, in all those things that might not make sense for other people, but gives the opportunity for other people to exist and actually gives them permission. It would really make a difference for other people to wake up in the morning and say, I can see a beacon of hope and really exist as who I am, as much as other people might see me as contradictions and have not seen, a version of like me before. And so to those recruiters, those friends, those, fathers, mothers, I say, just stand up, have a conversation with your safe circle, and just stand up for things you believe in. You don't have to be an activist per se. And again, just thank you. I cannot begin to say how many lives you've touched, Moud.
Thank you.
If it's not friends,
Thank
it's
you. A little round of applause for you, I think, here, right? Brilliant. Thank you so much. Do we have any more? We've got one at the back here. Mariam?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Hello.
can.
So thank you very much for that. I'm Hem, I work as a doctor and I specialise in psychiatry, and I'd just like to pick up on the theme of mental health for asylum seekers and refugees. It's hugely stressful, the whole process they go through. I've seen patients going through this for years. When I was first a doctor in South London, I worked in Croydon, and the asylum place there was called Luna House, and professionals nicknamed it Lunatic House because the stress of having to go through that process would send people mad, it would destroy them, it would break them down. And we would see them at a point where it reached the stage where they were suicidal. So I was going to say, if you work with asylum seekers or refugees and you notice they're suffering, their mental health is bad, they're talking about life's not worth living, or they're seeming depressed, get them to see a doctor. I'd like to also say, pick up on something that you said about these kind of structures of colonialism and racism and all of these sort of things. So, research shows that, we learn about different drugs and psychological therapies and these sort of things. And as doctors, you have to learn which are more effective and less effective than others, and sort of comparing all the different antidepressants you could have and all the different psychological therapies. Giving someone a job or allowing them to work has a much bigger effect than any antidepressant or psychological therapy. And these structures that prevent people from working, that is hugely damaging, and that is breaking people down. And at the moment we have a situation where the NHS is designed to help people, not make money. That's the purpose of the NHS. And so these structures are existing in society that break down and destroy, refugees and asylum seekers. And doctors and nurses that work for the NHS know how to put them back together again, or can try and put them back together again, which is why I was saying, if you work with asylum seekers and you know their mental health is going downhill, or you think something's wrong, get them to see a doctor. So, quite recently I saw somebody who was 19 years old, waiting for his asylum thing to be processed, waiting for years, and he tried to hang himself. That's the reason that I saw him. So he was in a very bad way. But NHS staff are looking to help people, put them back together again. So we know that not working is stressful, not having any money is stressful. And so we had what's called a community connector, who's somebody who works in the community mental health team, who put him in touch with various community organisations. So he had fulfilling activity rather than just being deactivated. So that's counteracting, various things that are stopping people from working and making them depressed, but also gave him travel allowance of £20 a day for 5 days a week. So that's counteracting a different kind of financial torture that's being imposed on these people.
Thank
so
you.
Just to summarise, if you know anyone, if you work with anyone, and their mental health is suffering, get them some help from a doctor.
Thank you for that. I think that's such an important theme to touch upon. We have, do you have organisations that you reach out to, that you work with? With Gaysians, we have a selection of mental health charities and support groups that we work with and direct people to that have specific sort of discounted or supported schemes for people that are, financially challenged. But perhaps you know some other tools and resources.
Yes, we do. First of all, thank you, Helen, for your kind words and for your work at Living Free. In terms of mental health, we do refer people to the doctor, but sometimes the waiting list for counseling is long. And one of the things while we're at health that I think we didn't touch on is people who are trans asylum seekers and the access to affirming medication or affirming hormones. It's almost impossible. I know already there's long waiting lists, but it's such a challenge that sometimes people end up trying to borrow money so they can buy things online or end up kind of on the black market scene. But we try to connect with different charities as well to engage with mental health or to refer people, but sometimes there's always a long waiting list. So we do try to encourage people to get in touch with community mental health nurses. If we have a crisis, especially around the house, then we have our outreach officers go there and ensure that they phone the mental health nurses and they attend the safe house if someone is in a crisis. But it's always a challenge to get people to get counseling because the waiting lists are so long. So we always try wherever we can to find that kind of support.
Thank you.
I was just maybe going to pick something up. So, I mean, one of the things that I think is particularly difficult for LGBTQ plus refugees is that there are services for LGBT people that aren't necessarily very culturally competent and can be quite racist. And then there are services for refugees and asylum seekers that can be quite homophobic and transphobic and biphobic. And so it can be very, even more difficult than it is for somebody who belongs to just one of those communities to access services that meet their needs. There are good charities. LGBT Foundation does a lot of mental health work as a charity, and it has some specialist work that targets people of colour. So there are charities that people can get referred to. There are lots of charities that do kind of sliding scale work. And so for someone in this position, it would be free, but you're right, the waiting lists are incredibly long. And then the other thing I was just going to say really quickly, is I think one of the things we fall into is the idea that everything is bad before someone arrives here, and then once you've got your refugee status, everything's fine. This is, of course, itself xenophobic and racist. People have left lives in countries that they love because they've had to. And kind of mental health is a good example of that. So LGBTQ plus people in the UK are twice as likely to have a mental health problem as cis straight people, and that's from cradle to grave, right? So the community I form part of, that was kind of born and raised here, have pretty terrible mental health outcomes already because of the experience of discrimination that we've had in this country. And LGBTQ plus refugees are going to experience that discrimination. They're going to experience discrimination within the LGBTQ plus community. So I just sort of wanted to do a little bit of complicating of the narrative of what it means to leave a place and arrive at a place, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really important that we have touched upon some of the complexities that trans people face and the general complexities around mental health that people in our communities face, particularly with all the upheaval that comes with the journey. And so arriving here doesn't mean that the work is done. There's a long way to go. There's a brilliant charity that we work with that are a therapeutic practice that are run by LGBTQ plus people of colour who are therapists. They're called Ashna, and they also take donations, so I'm sure we could link you up with them as well. But yeah, I just want to thank everybody. If we're ready to wrap up now, I think. Thank you both so much. If we can get a massive round of applause for Nancy and Moud.
thank you all. I'm going to do another round of applause for the three of you in a moment. I just want to thank all of you for coming. I'd like to also thank The Conduit for giving us this space so we can have this conversation, helping us live stream it. It's really valuable. I also want to thank the TEDxLondon team, particularly Tara, here for all their efforts to make today happen. And I'd like just one last round of applause for panelists, for all of you for being so generous and vulnerable and really having an incredible discussion that I know personally I really valued. So just thank you again. I'm supposed to say that the third floor has a bar. That's why I'm really here. If you do want to stay in this building and continue this conversation, there is space on the third floor in the lounge. There's a bar there. There's also a restaurant on the top floor. So feel free to keep the conversation going, and thank you.